Back in the 70s and 80s and even up until the 90s, boxing in the United States was a mainstream sport. For a long time, it was right up there with gridiron and basketball, etc. But since that time, the popularity of boxing in the United States has declined steadily. And now it is pretty much a niche sport, which the majority of Americans are simply not that interested in. They've got a heavyweight champion, for example, in Deontay Wilder, who can probably still walk down the street in most American cities and not be recognized. That would have been impossible for the likes of a Mike Tyson or a Muhammad Ali, who were literally mobbed wherever they went in the United States, and actually they were mobbed wherever they went in the world. Such was their fame and notoriety. Now, I've seen many Americans over the past, few years make excuses for the demise of American boxing and actually try to discredit the popularity of boxing in the UK. And one of the main arguments I've heard, including from Andre Ward, and I rate Andre Ward as a boxing analyst, but unfortunately, like many Americans, not all Americans, but many, he has a very insular perspective, and he doesn't understand the way the world works outside of the United States. He doesn't really understand what the world is like outside of the United States. And so Andre Ward is coming out with this silly explanation that I've heard a lot of Americans come out with when it comes to the popularity of boxing in the UK. And they say, well, in the UK, you don't have as many sports to choose from. So it's very easy for boxers to get a following in the UK because the fans really don't have any other sports to watch. This is a complete fallacy. It's complete and utter nonsense. The reason why boxing is more popular in the UK than it is in the United States is because the boxing fans care more. British fans are right the way across the board some of the most enthusiastic and passionate fans anywhere in the world. And that goes for all sports, whether it's football, whether it's boxing, whether it's cricket, whether it's rugby, whether it's motorsport, whether it's tennis. British fans are enthusiastic. They get excited. They get hyper over their sports stars. This is a cultural thing. It's got nothing to do with there's no other sports to watch. It's total nonsense. And I'm going to show you, I have had a look online and tried to search for some statistics. Maybe some of you guys can find better examples. This is a poll conducted in 2003. This is on a Wikipedia page here. This is from a poll conducted in 2003, which is obviously a long time ago. All right, so it's not the best example, but it just gives you an indication of how many other sports are popular in the United Kingdom. Top of the list, of course, is football, what Americans call soccer. That is by far and away the most popular sport in the UK. Underneath that is rugby union. Okay, another very popular sport in the UK that gets millions of people viewing, extremely passionate fans. Beneath that is tennis, which is very, very popular. When Wimbledon happens every year, it's like a national event. It's a huge deal. Below that is cricket. Cricket's still very popular in the UK. Millions of people watch cricket. Athletics is also very popular in the UK. Now, the popularity of athletics does ebb and flow, as it does with all sports, but I think it probably ebbs and flows with athletics more so than most other sports, because it's really dependent on how many successful athletes Britain has in athletics. But even when Britain was picking up silver medals most of the time, like in the 1990s when they had Chris Akabusi and Linford Christie and Sally Gunnell and all these kind of athletes, it was still massively popular back then, athletics. And these athletes, like Linford Christie, Sally Gunnell, etc., these people were household names in the UK. These people could go to any town or any city in the UK and they would be instantly recognized by people. Okay, so athletics has always been popular. Snooker, massively popular. I'm not a snooker fan. I really know nothing about snooker. But snooker has been so popular in the UK that I can name people like Stephen Hendry. I can name people like Ronnie Davis. You understand? I can name famous snooker players because that's how big snooker is, and I know nothing about snooker. You know? So, snooker's always been very popular, and again, you've had people in snooker in the UK who are household names, who can walk down the street in any British city, town or village and be recognized. Facts. Motorsport, another massively popular sport in the United Kingdom. Lewis Hamilton is a household name in the UK. Everybody knows Lewis Hamilton. He can go to any city or any town in the UK and people will instantly recognize Lewis Hamilton. It's a very popular sport. You know, millions of people watch it in the UK. So again, this idea that there's only 2 or 3 sports that people watch in it's just total nonsense. Rugby league, which is less popular than rugby union, but there's still a lot of people who watch it, and way, way, way down the list. Okay, again, this was in 2003, so boxing in the UK today would definitely be higher in the list than it is than it was back in 2003, but nonetheless, boxing is way down the list. Way down. And this is a time when Lennox Lewis was finishing up his career or had just retired. Ricky Hatton was on the ascent, etc. And back then, boxing nowhere near as popular as all these sports. Not as popular as rugby league, not as popular as motorsport, not as popular as snooker, athletics, cricket, tennis, rugby union, or football. But yet, there's only 2 or 3 sports they watch in the UK, so it's easy for anybody to get a following. No, it's not about how many sports people watch in the UK. People watch lots of sports in the UK. It's about the quality of the fans. Or let me not say the quality, the passion of the fans. British sporting fans are more passionate than American sporting fans. It's a cultural thing to be passionate at British sporting events. In America, people are just not as passionate at sporting events generally. They used to be more passionate back in the days. Yeah, you go back to the 90s, the 80s, and the 70s, and you look at the sporting events, American fans were far more passionate, certainly for boxing. But it's not like that anymore. For whatever reason, for whatever cultural reason, there's been certain changes, and American fans in general are just not as passionate anymore. And again, it's got nothing to do, or very little to do, with having loads of other sports to watch. I think it's just to do with the American mentality, the way it's changed over the years. The way Americans are, they're so commercialized for one, and they are, as a group, in a perpetual state of being unimpressed. You know, when you watch boxing matches in the United States, it's far more common to see people booing or to hear people booing in the United States at boxing events than it is in the UK. It's very common in the United States for them to boo fighters. They're just perpetually unimpressed by everything. In the UK, people do boo, of course, but nowhere near as often as they do in the United States, because the excitement level in the UK is higher. In the United States, people turn up with their arms folded like, show me something. You know, whereas people in the UK, they come to boxing events and other sporting events happy and charged, saying, let's do it. You know, let's go. It's a different attitude that British fans have when they turn up to these sporting events than the average American fan. I'm not saying all American fans. There are some passionate American fans. Of course there are. I'm just talking in general and showing you the difference in attitude between the different groups of fans. And when I say commercialized, I mean, for example, when it comes to gridiron, right? American football. When you watch the Super Bowl, they have a commercial, an advertisement between virtually every single play. So you can't watch the game from start to finish uninterrupted. You've got constant commercials every few seconds. How can you get, you know, if you're watching on television, how can you get overly excited when you've got that kind of situation where they're constantly breaking up the action with commercials all the time? And I guess even the nature of gridiron, the fact that you do have, such short play times where, the ball is in play for just a few seconds and then someone goes down and then you have to reset again. That is not really conducive to, a flowing, exciting game, So there are many reasons. I'm just using gridiron as one example. There are other games which do flow a lot more, like basketball, etc. But yeah, the sporting culture is different in the United States in terms of the attitude that people have towards sport. And it has changed over the past few decades. The sporting culture today in the United States is not the same as it was 30, 40 years ago. It's different. Whereas in the UK, the sporting culture today is actually very similar to how it was 30, 40 years ago. It hasn't changed that much. People are still very passionate. I mean, for example, Britain, and this is the dark side of the sporting culture in the UK, but throughout the 80s and the 90s especially, and, going back further into the 70s, there was a phenomenon of football hooliganism in the UK. Now, it still goes on. There are still rival groups of football fans who turn up just to have a fight. And sometimes people get seriously injured, blinded, maimed, sometimes killed in these fights that people have in Britain between rival groups of football supporters. But back in the 80s and the 90s, it was a massive problem in the UK, football hooliganism. And a lot of people were scared of match day, Saturdays and Sundays usually in their local area. If they lived near a football team that was notorious for hooliganism, a lot of people would stay in their houses because there was likely to be trouble. And on at least one occasion, I remember, I think it was in the 1990s, the England football team, there was talk of the England football team being banned from certain international tournaments or certain European tournaments because of the fact that they were bringing all these English football hooligans over with them. And there was definitely occasions where English fans were banned from attending certain matches in Europe because they had such a bad reputation for being hooligans, turning up and being crazy and fighting and all this kind of business. So this is the dark aspect of British sporting culture. And I know there's hooliganism in America too, but nowhere near to the extent of there was as the hooliganism in the UK when it comes to football. The passion, the aggression, the tribalism in the UK with regards to football was far, far more extreme than anything there's been in the United States over the past few decades. Yeah, I can't explain to you enough. Like in the 80s, when I first came to the UK in the 80s, I'm telling you, the tribalism with regards to football was crazy. It was crazy. People were getting hurt. People were getting, sometimes killed, maimed on a regular basis all over football, So yeah, that element of British sporting culture has changed, thankfully. Although recently there was some quite serious incident. I believe it was in London. It might have been Millwall. Was it Millwall maybe? And Millwall's always been kind of a notorious football club for hooliganism. Was it Millwall or was it West Ham? I can't remember now. But there was a recent incident where several people were injured in some kind of clash between rival groups of football fans. But for the most part, hooliganism in British football has been suppressed, okay? And it's been reduced compared to how it used to be. But the passion overall of British fans across all sports is still very much there. So it's a cultural thing. It's got nothing to do with having nothing else to watch. That is a total myth. That is something that American sports fans tell themselves to try and justify why they don't follow boxing the way that they should, to try and justify why they don't support boxing the way that they should. They try and dump on British sporting culture and say, oh, you guys have only got like 2 or 3 sports to watch. Absolute lies and absolute myth. So, just setting that record straight. It's to do with the passion of the British fans. That's what it's about. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. It's happening. I'm out.
Join me on Patreon. I upload a minimum of 2 podcasts every single week, covering a wide variety of controversial topics, as well as live stream Q&A sessions. Take a look on screen right now at some of the podcasts I've produced so far. For just $3 a month, the equivalent of about £2 a month, you get access to all my new podcasts and my entire back catalogue of past podcasts, including my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. You can listen on your computer or on your smartphone or tablet by downloading the Patreon app from the Google Play Store or the App Store for free. The Patreon app also allows you to download each podcast in MP3. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, you get access to dozens of hours of exclusive content. It's easy to sign up, there's no contract, and you can cancel at any time. So come and join our community of free and critical thinkers by signing up with me here on Patreon today.